Terrorist TPLF militias captured with WFP high-energy food aid. And Tanzanian farmers turn to new farming techniques like smart hydroponics. A very warm welcome to Addis News Hour. With it, I'm Shifara Olako. Do stay with us. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed held phone talks with Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett yesterday on bilateral and multilateral issues. They have vowed to further strengthen cooperation between the two countries, according to a Twitter post by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. In another story, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has expressed aspirations of Ethiopia to double agricultural productivity that has been registered over the last 3 years. If the agricultural productivity doubles as witnessed during the past 3 years, the country will also succeed in its green initiative and ensure food security. The Premier underlined that Ethiopia is moving closer to self-sufficient, adding that the nation has an immense potential to bring about plenty of agricultural products. Ethiopia has prioritized irrigated wheat production in line with import substitution endeavors. Now moving on, TPLF is repeating its dark history as it consumes WFP biscuits. The aid agencies were supposed to provide it to hungry children in Tigray. The TPLF was accused of starving the people of Tigray by diverting aid to acquire weapons in the 1980s. Sintayo Tamrat has more.
The Ethiopian government has been trying to inform the global community that it traced some aid agencies delivering food, medicine, and weapons to the terrorist TPLF people during the 8 months long law enforcement operation in Tigray. These humanitarian agencies were also doing some intelligence work for the terrorist group. For the confidentiality of this purpose, the aid agencies fired non-Tigrayan Ethiopians. This accusation by the Ethiopian government of certain aid agencies has now evidenced with TPLF army members themselves.
በዚህ በወልዲያ አድርገን መተን ወደዚህ ወደ ደብረ ታቦር አካባቢ ነው መተን ያለ ነው።
We've come here, marching a long way through Woldia. No one except our commanders knows where our destination would be. Actually, I don't know the source of our weapons, as I have lately joined them, not to miss my job back in my district. Of course, the biscuit we have is quite different from the normal biscuit we see in the market. When I eat that, I feel like it has more ingredients and fat. It seems something uncomfortable to health.
ልክ ዘይት እንደበዛበት የሆነ ነገር እንደበዛበት
The World Food Programme is facing new scrutiny this week after several captured fighters of the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front carried high-energy World Food Programme biscuits the aid agencies were supposed to provide to hungry children in Tigray. The latest controversy began after the Ethiopian army defeated TPLF forces in a key battlefront at Gasai town of Amhara regional state. Dozens of Tigrayan soldiers, including senior leaders of the terrorist group, surrendered. To reduce the burden of average Tigrayans facing hunger, the Ethiopian government declared unilateral ceasefire. However, the emboldened TPLF continued obstruction, this time by invading the Afar region where humanitarian aid delivery depended upon. Before the latest corroborative evidence of TPLF diverting aid, there were already signs and reports that the terrorist was receiving food aid and other resources meant for civilians. Tigrayan senior official Getachew Reda previously suggested his fighters have enough resources from Tigray to fuel the war, despite other Tigrayans facing starvation. The new revelations of TPLF misusing food aid from World Food Programme, USAID, and other aid agencies supposedly earmarked for the malnourished children is expected to test the patience of the Ethiopian government dealing with foreign aid organizations. Critics say history is being repeated as the TPLF rebels were similarly accused of starving regular Tigrayans by diverting food aid and the donated money to acquire weapons in the 1980s.
ኧረ ዘራፍ አባት የሞተ እንደው በአገር ይለቀሳል፣ እናትም ብትሞት በአገር ይለቀሳል፣ ወንድም የሞተ እንደው በአገር ይለቀሳል፣ ዘመድ የሞተ እንደው በአገር ይለቀሳል፣ አገር የሞተ እንደው ወዴት ይደረሳል? ወዴት ይደረሳል? ወዴት ይደረሳል? ስጋዬን በሉናል ደሜንም ጠጡና አጥንቴንም እንኳን በምንም አገሬን አትንኩ፣ በምንም አገሬን አትንኩ፣ አገሬን አትንኩ። ኧረ ዘራፍ ኧረ ዘራፍ ኧረ ዘራፍ ኧረ ዘራፍ ኧረ ዘራፍ
Welcome back, and it's now time to keep you updated on the latest trending pieces of information that happened over the last 24 hours. And here with me is Alula Taklamariam to help you bring up to speed. Alula, thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, what trending information have you learned over the last 24 hours about Ethiopia?
Well, I've seen three major stories that have been circulated over the social media, mainly on Facebook and Twitter. These are the announcement of Ethiopian government to build its own social media platform. Secondly, the most controversial personality, Samantha Power's latest Twitter message on TPLF and other issues. Thirdly, the conversation of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed with his Israeli counterpart Naftali Bennett on various issues. Especially to begin with the first point of the social media platform, Ethiopia is building its own Facebook, Twitter, and other social media platforms to make the communication platform credible and accountable. Actually, this will help ensure successful communication tool in the country, and it will also reduce the reliance on foreign technologies. It's a kind of technological advancement on the country. If it begins its own social media platform, it will help ensure credible information and add accountability on the social media users. The second issue that is being circulated on the social media, particularly on Twitter page, the Samantha Powers message. She tweeted two different messages in the last 24 hours that concerned about the TPLF. The first one is a call on the TPLF to withdraw its forces from the Amhara and the Afar regional states, where huge number of people are being displaced from these two regional states because of the conflict there that has been instigated by the TPLF clique. And the second one is it's a kind of we can say it's a good news that the USAID said it is beginning or launching humanitarian support to more than 136,000 Ethiopian displaced people from those conflict-torn areas in the northern part of Ethiopia, specifically in the Amhara regional state. We can say a lot about this one. Samantha Power we can say that Samantha Power is changing her mind towards the TPLF clique, because many agree that she's supporting the clique in different means. But now the global community is turning its face to this clique because of those atrocities being committed in those conflict areas.
Right.
And
so which pieces of information have you found most prominent or striking in a stated period of time?
Possibly we can say that this one, the Twitter page of the Samantha Power, we can take that one as a most striking event, and that got a lot of observations from the viewers.
Right. Yeah.
And analysts say that it's a kind of policy change. It could be a policy change towards such clique or terrorist group. they're now seeing differently, unlike the previous tweets that she tweeted on the message. And the third one is the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's telephone conversation with his Israeli counterpart Naftali Bennett on mutually boosting their country's relationship. This newly elected Prime Minister of Israeli Prime Minister wanted to strengthen their country's ties with Ethiopia, and it's also another good news for Ethiopians and the Israeli as well.
Indeed. Alula, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, moving on, the Ethiopian Federal Attorney General, Dr. Gideon Timotheos, says the TPLF has disrupted the ceasefire by displacing hundreds of thousands of innocent people and killing many in the Afar and Amhara states. In his interview with Stefan Sacker on the BBC World Service, Gideon added that this happened despite the unilateral ceasefire to allow for farming activities and aid distribution. Here's what he said.
When we are holding Mekelle and when our forces were in Tigray, there were constant issues that were being raised about humanitarian access, the humanitarian situation. We wanted to improve the humanitarian situation, and we're also concerned by the fact that the TPLF was sending wave after wave of civilians against our troops. There was an extensive use of child soldiers by the TPLF. So under these circumstances, to mitigate and minimize the humanitarian cost and suffering, we did the responsible thing. We declared a unilateral ceasefire and we withdrew our troops from Mekelle. Unfortunately, the TPLF continued with its aggression and belligerence and escalated the conflict. It expanded it into Afar and Amhara regional state, committing gross atrocities against civilians.
Now, regarding questions concerning false narratives and reports of the so-called human rights organizations, the government of Ethiopia is carefully reviewing various reports and verifying the facts, he said.
When we declared the humanitarian unilateral ceasefire, we established a humanitarian corridor through Afar. It was the TPLF, the terrorist TPLF, that expanded the conflict and turned this corridor into a conflict zone. As I said, we had facilitated humanitarian access and corridor through Afar. Now, as far as electricity and other essential services are concerned, the utility companies, the corporations that provide these services, they had several of their personnel killed in Tigray while they're trying to repair basic infrastructure. They have been subject to attacks. So under the existing insecurity, with the continued aggression of the TPLF, it would be difficult for these corporations to send their personnel, their employees in Tigray. So had the TPLF reciprocated the unilateral ceasefire, then it would have been a different circumstance. That's only a reference to a very small minority of organizations. The overwhelming majority of aid organizations are providing aid and assistance to those in need. We are cooperating with them. We facilitate their work. So we don't have a problem with that. And as I noted earlier, when we declared the unilateral ceasefire, our objective, our intent was for humanitarian aid to reach the people in Tigray without any hindrance. That's why we established the corridors through Afar. We allowed humanitarian flights to take off from Addis and fly to Mekelle, but the continued aggression from the side of the TPLF has created a situation on the ground that is making things more and more complicated.
The Attorney General also said that while some aid agencies have tried to worsen the situation, most have responded to the government's unilateral ceasefire and are working to provide humanitarian assistance, accentuating all aid agencies must comply with the country's laws and regulations when operating in the country. Take a listen.
You have to understand that all the organizations that provide assistance and aid that operate in our territory have to respect our rules and regulations. As I have mentioned earlier, the overwhelming majority of humanitarian organizations have no problem with this, and they continue to provide assistance and aid. That's not the case. There has been administrative measures, but these measures are to ensure compliance with the appropriate regulations. As I have stated earlier, several organizations, numbering in the hundreds, are operating all over the country, providing assistance for those in need. We don't have a problem with them. We're working with them. We have a very constructive relationship. And we are also in consultation, in dialogue with these entities you have mentioned. And we believe that they will be able to rectify the violations very soon and will be able to reinstate their license.
You're still watching this news hour. Moving on, both TPLF and Shene get support from foreigners to pursue destabilizing Ethiopia and the Horn of Africa at large. This remark was made by Taye Bogale in an exclusive interview with ETV. During the formation of transitional government, the TPLF took power and chased the OLF in its dirty game. He has also recalled. Koshumalsa reports.
Over the past 60 years, the Trojan horse TPLF has been tearing Ethiopia in divide and rule system, thereby eroding long-standing coexistence of people of the country. TPLF and Shene were acting covertly and openly, depending on conditions to destabilize Ethiopia, albeit of the fact that they used to shamelessly pointing fingers one another. The unholy conjugal declared recently of the two extremist groups seems exposing their hidden agenda. Responding to ETV, the historian Taye Bogale said, both TPLF and Shene were formed by Western powers to destabilize Ethiopia and the Horn of Africa at large.
Both TPLF and OLF were formed by Western powers to destabilize Ethiopia. It's not a unique anomaly that is attached to the Ethiopian cause. The Western powers, in the period under discussion, had high ambition to destabilize the whole of Africa and Asia. As part and parcel of this process, they deliberately opt to form TPLF and OLF in the northern and western part of Ethiopia. And with the assistance of the international actors, as I said, to disintegrate Ethiopia, TPLF-led EPRDF controlled the reign of power in 1991.
During the formation of transitional government decades back, TPLF and OLF failed to work together, ended up with bloodsheds, and TPLF had the upper hand to chase it away.
It summoned different parties to participate in the transitional government. But this was only for the lip service. Intrinsically, TPLF had great interest to control the political scenario, the economic arena, the social facets, as well as the cultural fabric of lives of the Ethiopian society under its own disposal. To this end, though it invited different parties to be part of the transitional government, it did not want to see a very potential power other than TPLF. Thus, it started different intrigues and political sabotage to marginalize or underestimate the OLF power. They collected the OLF army in a concentration camp and dismissed the majority of them. And the rest fled to the jungles of Ethiopia, in the western part actually.
The evil intention Shene pact with TPLF group is organized to harm the Oromo people and to fight back against Oromo, Kajala said. TPLF and OLF Shene have no national vision. Particularly, the OLF Shene was working with Egypt to dismantle Ethiopia and obstruct GERD as collateral.
With regard to OLF, from the onset, they want to secede Oromia from the Ethiopian region and to establish their own form of government. But that is not according to the interest of the Oromo people. When the House of People Representatives of Ethiopia labeled both groups, TPLF and OLF, as terrorist organizations, they told us in explicit language that they even want to help to create political turmoil and upheaval, as well as to dismiss Ethiopia from the surface of the earth. Getachew Redda and the OLF groups have an idea of two sides of a coin as far as the disintegration of Ethiopia is concerned. So OLF ultimately was supported by Egypt in their struggle of independence of Oromia for at least half a century. And they were assisted by not only Egypt, but also international powers. With regard to GERD, or Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, it is a tertiary thought for them.
Since they came the power by life support machine, and that machine is stationed in Washington, and they were feeding them from there. They give them weapons, they give them money, they give them diplomatic cover, and so on. This is a mercenary organization. I consider them, they are not different from the Phalange of Lebanon.
Wow.
They are
that
exactly
bad.
the Phalange. Yes, that bad. Ideologically the same they are, very racist, very backward in their thinking.
The PLF is looking for enlisting the same destructive forces to make conflicts in Ethiopia and the region as a whole, even though Western powers turn a blind eye.
The National Election Board of Ethiopia has presented to political parties investigation reports conducted by a team of experts on the voter registration in the Somali region. The consultation was attended by all board members and it was opened by the chairperson Burtukan Mideksa. Representatives of the 9 investigation teams presented the investigation process results and forwarded their recommendations for decisions. They presented their reports compiled from information based on interviews with individuals who are directly or indirectly related to the complaints, information gathered from the local community, field missions, photos, and videos from a variety of documented evidence. After hearing the report of the investigation team, the competing parties forwarded their requests concerning the decisions they expect from the board through their representatives. The board explained that it would announce the decisions to the parties based on the presented report. Thousands of Ethiopians rallied near Saudi Arabia embassy in Addis Ababa to denounce human rights violations committed by the Saudi government against undocumented Ethiopians in several parts of the country, including Riyadh, Jeddah, and other areas. Demonstrators called on the Saudi government to stop cruel acts against Ethiopians, including arrests, detention, unfair trials, torture, and other forms of ill treatment. Many Ethiopians, including children, women, and elderly people, are being ill-treated by the Saudi government in cellars, it was learned. They further urge Saudi to immediately repatriate Ethiopians from its detention centers. The Ethiopian Ministry of Foreign Affairs indicates that there are close to 80,000 Ethiopians in Saudi who are suffering from acute human rights violations by authorities of the government. The government of China has donated 300,000 doses of COVID-19 vaccines to Ethiopia. Chinese ambassador to Ethiopia Zhao Zhiyuan handed over the vaccines to the Health Minister Dr. Leah Taddese and the Education Minister Dr. Getahun Mokra in a ceremony held at the Addis Ababa Bode International Airport. Speaking on the occasion, Dr. Leah said the support will be utilized for the education sector, especially for teachers across the nation as they are vulnerable parts of the society for COVID-19 due to their job. The vaccines donated by the government of China will play a pivotal role in creating a safe teaching and learning environment. The Chinese ambassador to Ethiopia said his country is committed to helping tackle the challenge of the pandemic in Ethiopia. And finally, smart hydroponics could soon help urban dwellers in Tanzania grow their own crops in small spaces at a very low cost. At the moment, most of the country's food is grown by smallholder farmers highly vulnerable to climate change, because of their over-dependence on rain-fed agriculture. Jerusalem Batsia has more on that from CGTN.
This lettuce is growing on rows of plastic pipes that circulate water. Mwamvua Mlangua, the largest hydroponics farmer in Tanzania, learned about this soilless eco-friendly farming method on a trip to Israel. She says the lack of knowledge on smart hydroponics for many in the country has made financing her 4-year-old vegetable farm difficult.
I tried to source funds from the existing banks. By the time they didn't know what I'm talking about, because there was nobody doing hydroponic in Tanzania, so I had to use my own funds.
Mwamvua grows her vegetables on half an acre of land using fertilizer that dissolves in water, which is then recycled. She says with the assistance of a mobile app, a small space can yield up to 500% more than ordinary farms, while reducing water usage by 90%.
There's some app which you can download to control the nutrients which are coming on the plants. So you can do that. When you see the nutrients are lower, once you're connected to the internet, that app can tell you that like, the nutrients are lower, then you can come and add the nutrients.
Although global adoption rates for hydroponics are on the rise, Mwamvua says the country's adoption rate is still very low. To remedy that, she has begun passing her knowledge on the subject to university students studying agriculture. Though food is sufficient, Tanzania's overdependence on rain-fed agriculture often leads to low, unreliable and inconsistent productivity in the agriculture sector. With the potential use of less farmland, the Tanzanian government is looking to use methods like hydroponics to boost productivity.
What are we getting? Productivity is not about how many hours we spend working, not just about farm implements. It's also about the area you use to farm and what we have harvested.
Mwamvua sells her produce to major hotels, supermarkets and restaurants in the country. She is hoping that this soilless method of farming will grow to become the norm for farmers and urban dwellers across Tanzania.
Finally, a quick reminder of today's top stories. Terrorist TPLF militias captured with WFP high-energy food aid. And Tanzanian farmers turn to new farming techniques like smart hydroponics. And with that, we come to the end of this news hour. Many thanks for watching us. Bye-bye.